It was the afternoon of November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. Across the Pacific Northwest, families were preparing for the holiday. The skies were gray, the air cold and damp. At Portland International Airport, a man in a dark business suit and black raincoat walked to the Northwest Orient Airlines counter and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle with cash. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. He was calm. Unremarkable. The kind of man you would forget 5 minutes after he walked away. He would become the only person in American history to hijack a commercial airliner and get away with it. Beat. Flight 305 was a Boeing 727. 36 passengers boarded that day, along with a crew of 6. Cooper took seat 18C, near the rear of the aircraft, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, 5'10", roughly 175 pounds, dark hair, brown eyes, olive complexion. Slender. No one on that plane had any reason to notice him. Shortly after takeoff, at about 3 in the afternoon, the man in 18C handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number and slipped it into her pocket unread. Then he leaned toward her. "Miss," he said quietly. "You'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Beat. The note read, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me." Schaffner did as he asked. He opened his attaché case just enough for her to see inside: wires, a large battery, 8 red cylinders. Dynamite. She could not verify whether the device was real, but there was no mistaking what it looked like. She carried his demands to the cockpit. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills. He wanted 4 parachutes, 2 backpacks, 2 chest packs. He wanted them by the time the plane landed in Seattle. If those conditions were not met, he said, he would detonate the bomb. Beat. The pilots radioed ahead. The FBI in Seattle scrambled. Agents pulled $20 bills from banks across the city, photographed every one, and recorded every serial number. The parachutes were sourced from a local skydiving school. Everything Cooper demanded was waiting at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport when Flight 305 touched down at 5:46 p.m. The plane was directed to a remote, dimly lit section of the tarmac. A Northwest Airlines employee in civilian clothes approached, carrying a cloth bag with the money. The parachutes followed. Cooper kept his word. He released the 35 passengers, most of whom stepped off the aircraft with no idea anything unusual had happened. They would learn the truth from the evening news. Cooper kept the 3 pilots and a single flight attendant, a 23-year-old woman named Tina Mucklow. While the plane refueled, Cooper gave the crew a new flight plan. They would fly south toward Mexico City. Altitude, no higher than 10,000 feet. Airspeed, as low as possible, roughly 100 knots. Landing gear down. Wing flaps at 15 degrees. Cabin unpressurized. Every parameter was chosen to allow someone to exit a moving aircraft and survive. Cooper also cut open one of the reserve parachutes with a knife, improvising a container for the money. The damaged parachute was left behind. Investigators would later identify it as a training dummy, its canopy sewn shut. Cooper may not have realized it was unusable. Had he chosen it to jump with, the night might have ended differently. Beat. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 lifted off from Seattle-Tacoma for the second time. On board, 3 pilots, Tina Mucklow, and Dan Cooper. The aircraft banked south toward the Oregon border. Below lay the dense forests of the Cascade foothills. The temperature outside was dropping below freezing. A light rain was falling. Cooper ordered Mucklow to the cockpit and told her to close the curtain. Before she left, she pleaded with him. "Please," she said. "Please take the bomb with you." He did not answer. Mucklow was the last person to see Dan Cooper, standing in the aisle of a darkened airplane, tying what appeared to be the money bag around his waist. Beat. At 8 p.m., a warning light in the cockpit showed the rear air stair had been deployed. The crew's ears popped from the pressure drop. At 8:13, the tail section pitched sharply upward, a movement significant enough that the pilots had to adjust the trim to stabilize the aircraft. 170-some pounds had suddenly departed from the rear stairway of a Boeing 727. Dan Cooper was gone. Somewhere in the darkness over southwestern Washington, a man jumped out of a commercial airliner at 10,000 feet with $200,000 strapped to his body. He wore a business suit and loafers. The temperature was below freezing. The ground below was dense, unbroken forest. And no one ever saw him again. Beat. The plane landed in Reno at 11:02 p.m. The aft stairs were still down. The cabin was empty. Cooper had left behind his black clip-on tie, a tie clip, 2 of the 4 parachutes, and 8 Raleigh cigarette butts in the ashtray. Investigators recovered 66 partial fingerprints. None have ever been matched. Beat. What followed was the longest manhunt in FBI history, codenamed Norjack, for Northwest hijacking. In the days after the jump, agents, deputies, and volunteers combed the forests of Clark and Cowlitz counties on foot, by helicopter, and by boat. The search produced nothing. No parachute. No body. No sign that Cooper had ever reached the ground. The Bureau interviewed hundreds of witnesses and examined over 800 suspects in the first 5 years. All but roughly 24 were eliminated. Richard Floyd McCoy, who committed a nearly identical hijacking less than 5 months later, was ruled out by eyewitnesses who said he did not match the man from Flight 305. The investigation would span 45 years and produce tens of thousands of pages. It would become the only unsolved air piracy case in United States history. Then, in February 1980, exactly 3,000 days after the hijacking, something surfaced. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was smoothing sand on a Columbia River beach called Tenna Bar when he uncovered a rotting bundle of $20 bills, $5,800, still bound by rubber bands. The serial numbers matched the ransom. The discovery only deepened the mystery. Tenna Bar was miles from the estimated drop zone. Scientists still debate how the money arrived there, carried by current, buried by dredging, or placed deliberately. The bills offered no clues about the man who took them. Beat, the physical evidence was thin. The black clip-on tie Cooper removed before jumping, a JCPenney model discontinued in 1968, yielded a partial DNA profile in 2001. No match. Recent analysis detected microscopic particles on the fabric, lycopodium spores, unalloyed titanium, cerium, strontium sulfide. Materials tied to aerospace manufacturing and chemical processing. The kind of evidence that suggests a man who once worked with his hands in a specialized industry. After half a century, it is still not enough. On July 12, 2016, the FBI suspended its active investigation. The Norjack file would remain open for anyone pursuing a breakthrough, a parachute, identifiable remains. But the Bureau was done spending resources on a ghost. Beat, the name D.B. Cooper, came from a wire service reporter's error. The hijacker called himself Dan Cooper. That alias may have been borrowed from a French-Canadian comic book about a test pilot. Like everything else in this case, the connection has never been proven. More than 50 years have passed. The Boeing 727 Cooper flew on was scrapped in 1996. The aft air stair, the feature that made the 727 uniquely vulnerable to what happened that night, was redesigned fleet-wide. A device called the Cooper vane was installed on every 727 to prevent the stairs from being lowered in flight. A man who bought a $20 ticket changed the way aircraft are built. Tina Mucklow left Northwest Airlines not long after the hijacking and entered a convent. She has never granted a full interview. The pilots and crew are all gone now. Their memories died with them. And somewhere, in the forest, in the river, or in the quiet anonymity of an ordinary life, the answer still waits. The man who stepped off the edge of the world. The only unsolved chapter in American aviation crime. The question that has outlived everyone who asked it. Who was he? Where did he go? End.